The FCC is terrible at talking about anything critical at any given moment. Instead, on Twitter, we love to talk about the exact same things every 3 months after a parent event happens. I'm doing the exact same thing. Welcome to Discussing Dumb Discourse, where everything I say is right. Just roll with it, please. With the release of Multiverses being a platform fighter and the most obvious announcement from Riot upcoming fighting game, Project L, being free to play, comes with the obvious discussion regarding paying for fighting games versus free-to-play access. And with this discussion are the inevitable posts of Steam charts showing large numbers regarding Multiverses and its success on launch and its continued success versus the steady decline of other fighting games, let's say Guilty Gear before British drop, or the rapid decline of a game like DNF Duel. And while I can talk about how stupid constantly looking at Steam charts is when you have a player base that you can go out and still play the video game with, and the context of IP power in the West, or really just in general, that's not entirely the point of this video. The point of the video is simple. The future is here. It is free to play fighters. And it's time for companies, especially companies in Japan, to adapt. Something that I know they're very allergic to, but regardless, it's important. While this will be brought up time and time again by the FTC, I still think it's important to emphasize why fighting games are such bad products and why the consumer, us, should not be paying for this garbage. At the same time, maybe bring up some ideas of how they can monetize their video game in a healthy manner. I also want to reiterate why people are so concerned about free-to-play fighters and some examples of why people are so concerned. But we'll get into that in a moment. The standard for fighters is to typically release a terrible product for $60. Product is typically so bad, I have recommended people don't get into fighting games because of my miserable experience with the client, content provided, and the terrible netcode. But I'm addicted to the dopamine rush attached to this admittedly fun genre. It's great. Given the $60 price tag, you expect more from your video game. Instead, we are given a rehashed arcade mode we've endured for 20 plus odd years, sometimes a story mode that we get to play or watch, a terrible anime, I guess, and an exciting but not so exciting survivor mode attached to some of these games for reasons beyond my comprehension. While this may vary depending on where you decide to spend your minimum wage earnings for the day, the content provided to you is also minimum. Moving on to the online functionality, that too will vary. For $60, you too can wait a very long time in loading screens that sometimes gets fixed in post, attempt to connect to a player and fail over and over again, have your matchmaking simply just not work since release, and have a website dedicated to this with players pleading and begging that the company fix it. I swear to God. Or you just have some terrible lobby systems or really old arcade lobby systems that I guess work, but not particularly innovative. So, pick your poison. And depending on the dose, you may find out that your game does not even have a strong enough netcode to support players playing across the region, effectively killing your game before it even gets off the ground. It's a mess. Not everyone wants to go to an offline event to play their video game on a weekly, especially with the prices of everything getting so much higher, or people like me who are extremely introverted and don't like being around other people. What it really feels like, it's like the companies are like Jury and everyone else is like Jamie from the trailer, you know what I'm saying? Just a bunch of masochists. We must just love the pain that comes with being a fighting game fan. It's tragic. And after all these failures and robbing you in broad daylight comes paid DLC to get future characters. And if you really are a serious fan of the genre, you're going to pay up for these DLCs so you can actually lab out matchups. And while I could honestly just rage about how much I hate fighting games as a product and wish I didn't pay or interact with this hot garbage, there is some good with the bad. Developers in this current age are a little bit more responsive to feedback compared to beforehand, where they would release a balance patch for $60. I'm looking at you, Super Street Fighter Ultra Arcade whatever edition. As such, developers are attempting to make a minimum effort to fix their game in post. And in the new era, specifically talking about Street Fighter 6, your slave wage might honestly earn you a better product with actual offline content to do with, actual story mode, PvE content, what the whole jazz. I understand that a lot of fighting game players that are really competitive do not care about this type of stuff, but it's important that video games appeal to a casual audience, because the casuals are really what's making the money for these companies at the end of the day, and what's really keeping a lot of this type of stuff alive. Without adding more detail, I hope I paint a decent picture of the issues fighting games have and how paying for them is whack. So instead of engaging with this form of capitalism, let's choose another method to scam our players out of their money: free-to-play games. Might sound like an oxymoron until you build up a game called Genshin Impact. Free-to-play opens up the floodgates, allowing players to try without an upfront cost other than the system they must own, like a PC, a PlayStation, people that are on Xbox for some reason. It's common practice for PvP game to be free to play. Really, free to play fighters are a lot rarer. I believe, you have multiverses, you have Brawlhalla, 2 platform fighters, and there might be some other indie fighters in the mix. Occasionally you have fighting games that are particularly cheap, maybe after years of being out. Usually is a price tag attached to fighting games at the start of their launch, usually about $60 American. Typically characters are set to a free rotation in these free to play games for that particular week, or you get a set specific character that is free, kind of like in Killer Instinct. It's up to the players to use an in-game currency or to type in those wacky digits from their cards. Now the issue comes with companies attempting to monetize their game pretty much, and because there's so many unhealthy practices, fans tend to be, have very normal and rational reactions to the idea of free-to-play video games in the modern era. I do not blame people for being concerned with the idea of some fighting games being free-to-play. When you have games like gacha games like Genshin Impact or the garbage that is Diablo Immortal claiming to be free-to-play, it's hard to trust these companies. From the player's perspective, that you must spend money in order to engage with the product. And even in games like Valorant or Overwatch 2 on the horizon, cosmetic pricing in this case is ridiculous. These items are absolutely so expensive, especially with the rumored Overwatch 2 prices I saw given in a survey. Now, technically speaking, that's up to the player. It's just cosmetics. They don't really affect the gameplay. Not only that, you would just assume that you could just purchase the skin anytime you like. That's where you're wrong, and you can blame Fortnite or mobile games for this type of nonsense. Fortnite really changed the game when it comes to monetization from companies and how they monetize, how they create content, live service, all that type of stuff. By having a rotating shop, you're able to incentivize players to basically purchase something out of the shop before the timer runs out. The player never knows when that item's ever coming back, and that's like a huge problem for some people. The fear of missing out is so prevalent, and the more items or more content, I should say, that they add to the game, the less like your item that you wanted at one time will ever appear again. Sometimes you may be taking breaks, you may not get what you want, but then when it finally shows up in the shop, it's like you have to buy it. Just take Valorant as an example. These predatory practices regarding shops, battle passes, and attempting to buy currency but can never get the right dollar amount. You might buy $5 worth of credits and then realize you technically need like $7.50, but there's no $7.50 option. You gotta get a $10 option, so you get the $10 option, and then you realize that you have these odd dollar amounts left over, and something new popped up in the shop, but now you need $20 to afford that, and then like you get like this limited time item for 21 days or whatever with this big set and this cool knife that suddenly you feel the need to purchase because you don't want to miss out. It preys on the consumer and it works, and that's the worst part about it. Some people really can't handle their own when it comes to their money. It's really this more so the predatory practices that I take issue with. I think a lot of people take issue with. It's why people dread when they see free to play in the title, because they're concerned that will happen for their video game. But we shouldn't let these scummy practices stop fighting games from expanding to what should be well accepted. When companies pull this type of stuff off, like Diablo Immortal, just don't buy into it. Don't be like that one player who spent an absurd amount of money on this hot garbage. It's not worth it. The core reason I personally want fighting games to be free to play isn't just so I don't have to pay for them. I'm an idiot. I basically buy majority of fighting games. I have a bunch of fighting games in my Steam library, and I can't play most of this garbage. Before Strive came out, there weren't a lot of fighting games that interest me with rollback netcode, but I would try out anything really. I'd just get mad at the delayed netcode, do PvE stuff in it, and then uninstall the game afterward. At the end of the day, it's because the modern day requires fighting games to be free to play. Majority of PvP based games are. They don't necessarily need to go a live service direction. We don't need constant updates of our video games, modes, new characters every like 3 weeks, stuff like that. I know Multiverse is going that direction, but like Street Fighter 6 doesn't need to be like that. Tekken 8 doesn't need to be like that. Where our fighting game for any other title in the future doesn't need to go a live service direction, but it would be nice if it was free, if there was no upfront cost, so players who can be more interested to try out these titles. You see a huge burst of players excited to try out the video game. I think this is really important to have. And in my opinion, I believe there's two healthy ways you could potentially monetize your video game. One way would be to take the Street Fighter 5 approach in quotations. Street Fighter 5 probably should have been a free-to-play game in the first place, and I think it was being revved up to be one anyway, but instead it was a full-pay product. What should have happened is that it should have been free-to-play, and then you had paid skins, paid stages, and kind of paid characters, but you can still buy them with in-game currency. Or you take the Overwatch 2 approach, where you just simply have the PvP be free, and we can buy the PvP content if it's good. The idea of a price tag really does scare people a lot of times, because they don't want to necessarily spend their hard earn cash that took them so long to get, especially when they only can buy so many video games a year if they don't make a lot of money. That's a lot of the people in this world, man. Now, obviously, even if we get a large influx of players for a free-to-play video game, it's not like all these players will stay. In a lot of situations, they will pick up the game, try out, and move on with their lives, and that's okay. Players don't have to feel entitled that just because they play a fighting game that they gotta play every day. It's about like this exposure to the product and allowing players to really feel what it's like. Gaming is a very competitive market. Companies have to fight for players' time and their interest, and I believe it's undeniable that FGC devs have to adjust to this type of stuff. Anyway, what do y'all think? Like, comment, subscribe, you know the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you around next time. This has been Bit Peace.